Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Parallel League podcast. Mookah and I are joined by some very special guests today. We've got head of partnerships from Parallel, Fitch. Y'all probably know Fitch by now. If you don't, what are you doing? And we also have the co-founder of YGG. We've got a very special Gabby. So welcome to the show, guys. How are you feeling today?
Good. I'm excited.
Good. This particular episode is going to be a focus on bonds, kind of talking about them, also the esports league, and getting into the nitty gritty. If you don't know much about bonds and what they are, this is the episode for you. But before we get into that, let's go over some news real quick from the previous weekend. Mookah, you want to start us out?
Yeah, so the Exile just did their underground minor, and congrats to Fast Surrender, please, who won the tournament. He's actually a Dota player, which a lot of people are finding out now. That's his main game, and he decided to pick up Parallel and just win a minor, which was really, really cool to see. This tournament, though, just quick highlights. Like, I think this was probably one of the coolest showings of tournaments we've seen in Parallel so far. Gafar showing strong after its debut in the YGG East qualifier, Iraq making its debut, and top 2 players top 8ing with Iraq. So the meta is like getting very, very diverse. I think it's like more than half of the Paragons are competitive right now. Like, you can create a lineup with them. So that's amazing to see. It was a lot of fun to see these new decks on stream. If you haven't watched the broadcast, I really recommend you doing so. The games were absolutely wild.
And also a shout out to Alliestrasza for coming in second, right? He's part of YGG. So, Gabby, you're probably pretty proud of him there.
Very.
Yes. And
yeah, he's coming to Manila as well. So excited to see him. Yeah.
So exciting. Yeah, we're all really, really hyped for Manila. The qualifiers were epic, and it's all culminating to $100,000 tournament. I mean, that's just absolutely insane. But I agree, Mookah. The Exile tournament was fantastic to see. And we also have another qualifiers this weekend, the top 64 from the October ranked ladder. That's going to be taking place. So the winner will get another seat at the next major in December. So that's also quite exciting.
Yeah, those are pretty big too, because we are starting to notice an uptick of players coming from other scenes, right? Like Fast Surrender, please, coming from Dota. There's a few players coming from other TCGs, like Cards is being a noticeable community that's coming into the Parallel scene now. And these guys are starting to top some tournaments and they may be behind. Like, they may feel like they're behind. So these qualifiers really give them an edge if they can win these out to just immediately come to the major, even if they feel like they're behind on points. And then suddenly you're just like skyrocketing up the pro circuit leaderboard. So it's a good opportunity for a lot of the guys coming in now still.
Yeah, I mean, it has some interesting implications for League Season 2, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. You know, there's a lot that I can't say, but we can say that, you know, we'd like there to be a League Season 2, and there's been a bunch of discussions about what that entails. And I think one of the things, you know, working with the folks at 983 and how do we set up League Season 1, which I think had a lot of good, but had a lot of things that were lessons to be learned as well, right? But one of the things that we said going into it is, like, we know we're in a compressed season, and we know that we need to give people opportunities to come in later in the season. So, like, we know that there's going to be people from other communities finding out about this. We know that there needs to be an opportunity for them to get involved and not be so far behind, right? And so I think that really just makes me more excited for implications for Season 2, where we can look at that and say, well, now everyone can get in on the same level playing field. And so, you know, let's go push that message out to a bunch of different communities. But yeah, I do think that that's one strength of the design of Season 1 was, like, we knew that we were under time crunch, and we knew we needed to do some things to facilitate people coming in later.
Fitch, when can people expect announcements about the next season and sort of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I will. I guess I'll commit us to a certain time, because it's probably fairly reasonable to do so. I don't think anyone will yell at me for this one, but I'm probably around the end of the year, right? So there's some work that we want to do, and I don't want to steal the thunder of folks involved on this, but we want to kind of rework the way the league looks and feels, and the way that it's designed to an extent. and the amount of events and the amount of IRLs and things are all questions that are being asked right now. And so the team there's a number of different people involved in making the league happen, and we're all kind of over the last few weeks coming together and saying, okay, what's worked with league season 1, what's not worked, what are the things that we would like to do differently, what are some aspirations that we have for maybe it being more IRLs or things like that. And so I think that process has begun and gives me confidence to say we'll probably be ready for some type of announcement about season 2 towards the end of the year.
Okay. All right. I'll accept that. All right. Before we move on to more discussion about bonds and stuff like that, you can always go to parallelleague.game for more just updates about like events and stuff like that for the league. There's one more minor coming up in December, majors 2 and 3, and then of course the World Championship, the Prime Championship in Vegas on March 1st and 2nd. So
Oh, I'm
again,
excited.
oh yeah, I mean, it's probably the thing I'm most looking forward to in 2025. I cannot wait. But
We're grinding so fast though. I just want to note
oh,
that like it feels like October felt like a sleeping giant. Like it started to feel like, oh my god, we're about to hit like a crazy like sequence of like events coming. And then Gabby, after YGG, I think you guys are really setting us up for like a crazy end of the league. Like we have this
Absolutely.
crazy good tournament in the middle that's going to create so much excitement into like into major world championship. Like that's going to be an insane sprint. I'm really excited for all
And
of
then
that. I mean, the
aftermath is
energy.
gonna mix
Yeah.
everything up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the timing of Aftermath in there to just kind of like stir the pot up, and everybody's now, discombobulated again, trying to figure out the meta. And it's at a time where it's like you need to figure out the meta, right? I love what competition has done for the parallel scene. I'm really, really keen on it, right? And yeah, maybe Gabby, talk a little bit about how you see that with YGG kind of in the parallel scene. Like, what has it been like? Because you're running an organization that is a competitive organization and does field some of the best players. Like, what's that experience been like, kind of seeing the competitive scene for parallel roll out from your perspective? Because I'm looking at it from one way, but you're looking at it from a different way.
Yeah, so when we started YDG, the whole mission was to bring people into Web3 games, but bring them at a level where they're very skilled and capable so that they have a chance to earn crypto and own assets. We started with an esports team in Axie, and this is way back, I would say, early 21. We didn't get involved with Parallel until just last year, 2023. Can you imagine? It's only been a
wow.
year. And
Great.
uh, interestingly, just dove right to it. Mike, who heads our esports program, he was actually doing esports for Hearthstone back in Europe. So he had a lot of TCG experience already. And then, interestingly, a lot of the skills of our Axie guys translated super well into Parallel. So we had DC and Sequinox and a bunch of other guys that were already competitive in Axie, pick up Parallel, and honestly just got hooked immediately. So it wasn't that hard for us to start bringing a team over and start being competitive. We knew early on that we wanted to focus on the players, not only bringing up an esports competitive team, but also on the training aspect. So that's what we focused on in the last year. And yeah, it's just been a really gratifying experience being kind of part of the birth of the competitive scene. I tell our guys, like, imagine what it was like to be at the birth of like competitive scene for Hearthstone, like I don't know, a decade back or whatever. That's how it feels now, and I think that's how a lot of other people feel as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great to hear that because I've heard other people say the same. And I guess if we're giving people that feeling, we must be doing something right, Certainly Hearthstone is a leader and an innovator and first mover in so many ways in this, space in which we're playing. So
I can definitely attest to that. I feel a lot of the players that I've talked to, the Finos, the Tylers, it feels like the early days, where there's just something, it's small, but it's growing. And, I
We're
think,
at the birth of the scene, right?
yeah, I think we feel like there's really something special here. And Gabby, it's really, cool to hear that from you as well. Gabby, what's your main in parallel? What do you play? I'm curious.
Brand, of course. Yeah,
Brand? Okay.
yeah,
Fascinating. Love it.
That's an
yeah.
honorable fraud pick.
Yeah,
Well,
I reluctantly play Cathari if Brand doesn't work, but I will never play New Dawn. I tried playing one game of New Dawn. I was like,
this
I'm out.
isn't it.
Not for me.
Oh, that's amazing. So yeah, you gave us a little bit of a background on YGG. It's also a questing platform too. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right. So we started YGG almost around 4 years ago now, and there's several things that we do. But a big part of what we do is we train players to get better at the games that we work with. And yeah, with Parallel, we've been working with questing and training people to get up to speed. So there's two components to that. One is that we have the Parallel Academy, which we're doing partnered with the guys at One Turn Tilt. The Tilt guys have just been really really passionate players of Parallel, and when we started working with Tilt, they were already playing Parallel, so kind of it was a really good partnership because most of their guys are in the Philippines, and yeah, they're already passionate about the game. And then we created this basically learning series in their Discord where we get people to level up their knowledge about the game. And second is that we have the questing side. So go to our website yieldguild.io. It runs in questing seasons, and there are several quests that you can do for Parallel that we've done for several seasons already. Where first it you get some rewards for getting up to finishing rookie mode, and then yeah, like different skill levels in the game. And we probably want to spice things up by doing some like guild versus guild battles later on. Those are things that we're looking at. But generally, we want to bring people to the games that we work with, onboard them, and then help them get better. And on the high end side is YGG Esports, where
Mm.
we've run the team starting with DC, Sequinox, and then Ziliaser came over, and then we have Fino and Tyler joining us. So they're the guys that are really carrying the banner for us, who are at the top of the game, making the decks. They're the face of YGG when it comes to Parallel.
Awesome.
I really
And
want to comment on real quick about the education side of things that YGG is involved with, because I was like blown away in the last few tournaments at the uptick of players coming from like the regions that you are like educating or spending effort on educating. Starting with the YGG qualifiers, I remember talking with people in Exile, with like because I work with a lot of the players there, and saying like there's so many names that I don't recognize. Like just be careful. Like don't treat it like these are easy. There's so many players, and they were doing well like through that tournament,
They got
through
good
both the
fast, right?
qualifiers. Yeah, through both qualifiers, and now seeing them even in this last minor, there's some of the names I'm starting to recognize. Like oh, be careful for this guy. Watch out for some of these players, and it just happened in like a flash. Like it felt like suddenly out of nowhere, all these players started booming. And shout out to the Tilt guys, because I've seen some of their classes, even though I can't understand the language barrier, but the amount of people tuning in is unreal. Absolutely
Yeah.
unreal. People wanting to learn about Parallel and getting knowledge from some of the best, like the guys at Tilt. There's many master players, very like high end players.
Agent K and
Yeah,
Master Penzo have been
AJ.
doing God's work over there.
yeah,
Big shout out to
absolutely
Agent
killing
K.
it.
Agent K is the man. I mean, yeah, there's some folks, I guess, that are, affiliated with you guys, Excelsior and Agent K, who are like some of my absolute favorite Parallel community people. Just beast mode. Like the work ethic is off the charts. It's crazy.
I would agree that like tilt players potentially win the prize for like most passion I've seen.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they get
Yeah,
Um,
that's
after it.
why we
And
really
what was-
want to get a good competitive scene going in Asia, because a lot of the players from the Philippines and around Southeast Asia, like, the passports aren't as strong. It's not easy to travel to the US for a tournament. It's pretty
mm,
expensive. So we want to make sure that we can bring really good competitive scene out here in Asia.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it seems like Parallel is growing a lot out there for sure, and you would agree with that. Like the sentiment when people see the game, they get really excited about it, and I think the YGG Play Summit, showdown will be a good test of that to see, the reception to it and everything.
Yeah, I mean the to that point, Allie, like we don't even have mobile, right? I mean, the
True.
game hasn't been really fully optimized nor on Mac, nor on mobile. So for an area where like the saturation of higher end PCs is not as great as the West, oftentimes that's crazy to see that it's still doing so well. And it was a couple of us were talking like it's going to be crazy when mobile happens. Or, it's going to explode.
Yeah.
I think because sort of the groundwork has been laid, right? Between what YGG has done and some groups like Tilt and then efforts that Parallel has undertaken and our collaborations together. Yeah, there's like now an awareness of Parallel there, I think, and an awareness that this is an esports title with like a cool earning economy and ways to participate in that have relatively low barriers to entry. So I think when you add mobile into that mix, you get
Absolutely.
a potentially
Yeah.
explosive reaction.
That's actually very interesting, and I'm gonna use that as a segue for us to bounce off of. With all these influx of players, right? The episode today is about bonds. So, how do bonds play into the system of growing players? How is it different, and how does it pair with what like people at YGG? How does that all pair together and mesh? I guess, Fitch, if you can start.
Yeah, I mean, so bonds are a product from Echelon, which is the token foundation that supports Prime and supports different aspects of the parallel ecosystem. And bonds, I think, has been from my role and my perspective at Parallel, one of the most exciting things that's been in development, and certainly the most exciting thing from Echelon that's been in development. Because what it is effectively social units, right? Like I'm a big believer in growth of a game ecosystem around the importance of social units. If you think about it, and Muka, you're a great example with Exile. Those are your friends, those are people that you work with, to come up with strategies. That social aspect reinforces how much you're going to play the game, right? And how much you're going to tell other people about how cool the game is, and so on and so forth. So, from a perspective of parallel strategy and growing the player base, you want to activate advocates and create champions for the game. I think that's very much where we're at in the stage of growth of parallel. And so we've talked about this internally. I don't know if anybody's ever heard me really explain my perspective on this before, but that's really, I believe, where we're at. Because if you have a game that's still just PC, not necessarily fully optimized, still has its UX issues that we all know, right? And those things are getting an overhaul, but isn't on mobile yet, isn't on Mac yet, is still technically in a beta, is in its first season of a league, which we're ironing out the kinks. Well, who are you going to appeal to? You're going to appeal to like really enfranchised TCG players. And that's pretty much it, right? But guess who we're succeeding at recruiting right now? Really enfranchised TCG players
Yeah.
working. Like it's happening in real time. We see it every week. And it's not anymore like something that I see and you guys don't. You guys see it now. Everyone sees it now because they're popping up in the tournaments and having success. The way it connects back to bonds is bonds scale the social aspect of the game, right? They are the place where you socialize. They're going to have information for you. They're going to have connections for you. They're going to have people who are going to be able to coach you. They're going to have deck lists. They're going to be able to actually provide you the cards that you need if you want to be part of the earning ecosystem. And we know that if you get involved in the earning ecosystem, you are much more likely to become a super user. So that's for me what's so exciting about bonds is like it does relate to the esports aspect very strongly. And I think that bonds will eventually sort of become esports organizations in a way of speaking. They aren't, strictly that. They are basically means to share, I would say, information, assets, things like that. But that at a strict definition, that's kind of what they are. But if you extrapolate that out, what does that lead you to? It leads you to the concept of esports.
Hmm.
And that's just like the direct connection that I think we all made internally is like, well, this is where things are going to go, so we may as well push it in that direction. So I do see that bonds have a strong correlation with and synergy with the league.
We really want to okay, first of all, fantastic answer. Like, I think that really sums up why bonds are so important for the esports scene. Just in case, someone listening to this is still like, what is it? Like, when you really distill it down, it is like a revolutionary card sharing system because
Yeah.
you have to remember that like there are two aspects of parallel here. Like you can do the whole free to play traditional system where your cards are locked to your account, but as Fitch has been saying, if you want to tap into earning prime, like maybe you can speak a little bit more
Yeah.
on that. that's where bonds will really come in. So you can borrow cards and join bonds that are actually digital assets, NFT versions of the cards.
100%. And I'm thank you for that call out, Allie, because I don't want to speak to just people who may know. I anticipate that there will be listeners who don't understand that distinction. So Parallel is, as you alluded to, a free to play game, but Parallel also has a earning economy associated with it, where if you're collecting NFT versions of cards, then you can participate in this ability to earn tokens, and that balance is important because it means you have to have sunk some cost to get some value out, right? But we believe that, hey, if you're putting time and money into a game ecosystem, you should be able to not only own those things that you sort of acquired, and be able to freely transact them, but you should be able to get something back for the time that you spent. So that's just kind of a value proposition that Parallel operates under. And Echelon is building something that is basically able to take that to the next level, and that's bonds. And so if you want to participate in that sort of earning system, bonds allow you to do so for free, effectively. You don't actually have to acquire the cards, because what a bond is a group of people who have acquired cards that are forming a sort of pseudo organization and saying, we're going to, leveraging the technology that Echelon has built, be able to share these things out with somebody in a seamless way where, effectively you don't have to relinquish ownership of them as the bond organization, but you can lend them to a participant in the bond organization. So their ability to earn is fully unlocked. So this makes sense for, again, highly enfranchised players are able to effectively really take their experience to the next level. And not required, again, you can very much participate in every aspect of the esports scene without this, but it does add a new level to it, and it adds new levels of benefit for those who want to participate in that system. And again, it's also that social aspect too. So you're gathering together with other people, you're sharing with each other, you're benefiting each other, and that's not just from a financial perspective, but that's from an information and a sociability perspective as well.
There's a few points I want to touch on with that I think are like really important to bring across. One, I know like some people that are new to Parallel or even like an earning kind of system within a card game may be a little skeptical at first. I like to describe it kind of like a kickback kind of like thing. So like you have some cards and you're not, it's not like you're going to be rich off playing the game, but you'll get a little kickback so that maybe when new expansions come out, you're kind of getting rewarded for playing, and boom, now you can pay for your next expansion packs or things like that. It's like a nice little kickback that you can use and stuff like that. Not anything like super crazy too. I think the bonds as a whole kind of facilitate this like kind of like TCG shop experience, like because I have a background from like Yu-Gi-Oh. I used to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, and it was not uncommon that if you were really good at your Yu-Gi-Oh local shop, they would like sponsor you to play on their behalf, and basically they'd give you all the cards. You would go and you just have to rep like the merch, or you have some other deal or something like that, and you just get to play for free. Some, and not even then, paper TCGs, you borrow cards all the time. Like I borrowed decks from friends, I borrowed cards from friends all the time, and facilitating that experience online is really good to new players for one, even if you're free to play, because there's nothing upfront for you to join a bond. You're not taking any like financial burden from joining a bond. You get to join a group, you get cards, you get knowledge. It's kind of like you joining a shop, showing that you're good at the game, and they're like, yo, let's take this guy in and show them how to play and stuff. And they can like, it's like a mutual gain kind of like thing. That experience is like, I feel like been missing in online TCGs. And the bond system, I'll be honest, when it was, that's why I got into Parallel. Like bonds weren't even out. It was just like a thing that I ran across. I read about them, and I was like, listen, because I came into Parallel relatively late compared to like the old school guys. Like I came in when the base set was already done, and like alpha was coming out. So like relatively early for some, relatively late for the guys that were the OGs. And I had no cards, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I don't want to buy all these cards. I don't know like what cards I'm gonna like, what decks I'm gonna like. I haven't even explored the game. It's not even out yet. What do I do? And then I was like, oh, the card effects and their stats are listed online. What if I can just showcase I know how to deck build, and maybe a group will reach out to me and be like, oh, let's have Mookah play. because then I can join their bond. I thought I was scheming them. That was like my origin. I was like, I'm gonna scam some people into like lending me their cards because I'm gonna show I'm good at making the thing, and then I don't have to do anything. And then I remember Kalos at the time had shown his earthen deck, and I was like, okay, let me make some improvements to this and showcase that. So I did that deck and like a vehicle Marco deck. And then the people that are now the co-founders of Exile reached out to me and they're like, hey, you look like you know what you're doing. Have you played TCGs before? And I kind of just, I gave them the whole sales pitch. I played Yu-Gi-Oh at a competitive level. I've, been a legend in Hearthstone before. And they were like, yo, come on, like, let's get you in. So I started playing with them and talking shop. And then that kind of led me to being a coach at Exile. So it kind of just all led together off this bond thing. Like I found a group, I showcased that, like, hey, I know the game or whatever. I didn't have to do anything up front. And I'll be honest, I don't really even use the bond system right now, but it was my gateway. It was my huge gateway. I use all the AP cards because I'm like kind of fine. I don't really worry too much about that. But that social mechanic I feel like is super underrated because it did feel like when I first went to my first Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, like locals and stuff, and getting to meet people and learning what's good, what's not good, and steadily showing like, hey, I know what I'm doing. And then people being like, hey, you can borrow my cards for this regional, or you can borrow my cards for the YCS, which are like the championship tournaments. So that mechanic does not exist in other online TCGs, and that was one of the biggest hooks to get me on.
Yeah. I mean, well said, right? Like, and you talked so well about the social aspect of it, not like the financial aspect of it.
Yeah.
There is a financial aspect of it, but really like that ability to get together with other people and form connections, right? Like that to me is as exciting, if not more exciting than any financial aspect here. But I mean, Gabby, I'm curious, like your take on this because really, I think compared to anyone on this call, you have more experience with these sort of tokenized and earning based
Yep.
ecosystems and the social elements that come out of that. Like, how have you seen that?
One of the most important unlocks for Web3 gaming is knowing who the different stakeholders are, right? Like you have your players, then you have your asset owners, then you have your speculators. Sometimes they're the same people, but oftentimes there are different players in your ecosystem. And this is something that we saw with Axie. We were, I would say, the first ones to really scale what was their asset lending or their scholarship system back in the day. And we at the peak we were doing that with over 30,000 players. The only reason we're not a bond in Parallel is that we came in, I would say, like late last year, like October last year, relatively late, and we feel like we couldn't really compete when it came to cards. So we have a lot of avatars. We have a decent amount of prime, but we said let's not focus on the cards. Let's focus on the players and then training them up to be good. So that's why we are where we are now with esports, with questing, with the academy. But it's such an important part of the ecosystem. If the current bond players weren't doing so well, we'd have to do it ourselves. But right now, what we're probably doing is that we're probably the largest source of player referrals to the bonds right now because we train our guys up, and then with our questing they get to a level where they're pretty good, they're competitive immediately, and if they want to kind of further their journey into Parallel, then they will need access to cards, and yeah, that's where the bonds come in.
Yeah, so basically it's a cohesive relationship, right? Like you can be a part of a YGG esports team and also a part of a bond, correct? Like they're not conflicting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's really important for players to know. And Fitch, I'm curious, like, one, how many bonds do we have so far? And do you envision more bonds coming on, or do you think it's going to just sort of be like a few, 4 or 5 Titan bonds in the ecosystem, and most players will access those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so right now, we have Paragons, we have Devmons, we have Midnighters, we have Contagion, and we have Exile. So we have 5 currently. And then I know that the Echelon team has just solicited openings for an additional set of bonds, and I think that number is also 5. So they're accepting applications right now from people who are interested in
Mm.
being bonds. So yeah, yeah, he's got to say, maybe, but I think, I think that there is a probably a natural limit to the number of bonds if I'm thinking from like maybe an economic perspective. Is okay, so let me say this. One thing is Aftermath, the upcoming drop, which is on the 23rd. That presents opportunities for people who are would-be bonds to get in, right? Because now the new meta is coming and you can just go buy a bunch of packs and your effective cost of acquisition is much lower than going and buying everything off of secondary, because on secondary things get priced up, right? So there's a inbound point for bonds, I would say, with Aftermath specifically. But, just in general, right? I think there is probably a natural limit at which you're going to find bonds maybe aren't coming on as frequently anymore, and I don't know what that number would be. But to Gabby's point, there are going to be affiliate organizations. So there's a natural limit, I think, where bonds are going to sort of cap off at, but we're not at that place right now, and there's plenty of room to continue growing the amount of bonds. And like I said, Echelon is actively taking bond applications. But I think that, to Gabby's point, there are affiliate organizations who are able to effectively take advantage of the existing bonds, right? And be sort of part of that ecosystem in that way. So what you could see is, like, for League Season 2, maybe there's traditional esports organizations who want to take advantage of the cards that an existing bond has. So they don't necessarily need to go become a new bond to be involved in the esports scene as an esports organization. I guess the way that I would answer that, Ali, is like the participants in the parallel esports scene are really going to be like three types of people. They're going to be members of a bond. They're going to be highly skilled individuals. Maybe they have a patron or maybe they don't, because you don't actually really need one. You just need to have the free to play cards. And they're going to be probably traditional esports organizations, which I would say that YGG in many ways is a traditional esports organization. So they would fit more into that bucket. But there's somewhere also, bit of a hybrid approach, maybe between bonds, given how much of the Web3 ecosystem knowledge and infrastructure they have. So, I do think that as we reach season 2, there's going to be a lot more of the traditional non-Web3 esports organizations coming into play. And I'm very interested to see, are there going to be collaborations between these types of organizations and the existing bonds? Because I think the answer is probably yes.
Okay. I want to kind of do not an experiment. I want to kind of walk us through a scenario for someone that is coming from another TCG that's a highly skilled player, has sort of heard about all of this. One, I want to like address their maybe like their skepticism of like, okay, you're saying that I can join a bond and get cards for free. Like, what's the payout structure there? Is this justified? And then also sort of like the process of what does that even look like? Like, do I need to prove myself as an amazing player on the ladder first before I can join one? Or, just sort of walk us through what a pro player from in a TCG would do to get involved in this entire process.
Yeah, I think the answer that I'll give today is probably going to be significantly different from what the answer will be in 3 months, right? And then different from what the answer will be in 6 months, in the sense that the onboarding flow is going to be a lot cleaner and more straightforward as this whole thing sort of unfolds, right? So bonds are very much in an alpha phase right now, but joining Parallel Discord, joining Echelon Discord, are great places to start for this type of stuff. It is in that phase where it's like a little bit more of a manual process, because the bond infrastructure isn't fully automated yet. And so, yeah, like getting connected with any one of the aforementioned teams is the other possible way to go. So I'd say 3 like really viable starting points are, go to Parallel Discord and ask, go to Echelon Discord and ask, or get connected directly with one of the teams. So that's, again, Paragon's DAO, devmons.gg, I believe, is their their sort of handle. We've got Exile, we've got Midnighters, and who did I? Oh, Contagion as well. Yeah, Contagion as well. So these organizations will eventually have a lot more like singular of like a portal where you can go and sort of look at all of them and see what fits you the best. But as we're sort of rolling out bonds, that onboarding experience is going to be polished up. And then in terms of like which bond to pick, that's always going to be sort of an individual choice. There's going to be some that have, different flavors. They're all going to be, branded up in their own unique ways, and have maybe access to different assets and things like that. Or maybe different value propositions, like where hardcore, players, but not necessarily like esports grinders, or hey, we're going for tournament wins. Like we're trying to be competing at the highest level. All of them are going to have their own different perspective on where they're at within esports itself versus just competitive play in general, because you don't necessarily need to be an esports player to be playing and earning at a high level in parallel either. So both of those things are valid, and you're going to find a range of experiences with the different bonds.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the culture within the bonds is already starting to shape up, and you can see it a lot. Like, I spend a lot of time within Exile, so they have a particular way of doing it. Like, they do like applications, and they want to see how like well you're doing at certain points before they bring you in, and then they see how you're performing and things like that. And then you have groups like Paragons that want to, kind of just open the possibilities for a lot of different types of players. So they're like they just have more, it's a lot more easier access, I guess I want to say. And even like all these other groups like devmons is very, very like not that many borrowers, but like it's very, very selected, cultivated, competitive players. So you're seeing the identities across the bonds already start to form, which is actually something I didn't expect, and it's really cool to see. Actually, I thought it was, honestly, when it first came out, it was going to be like a mad dash for who could get as many players, but they're all starting to form their cultures around what they deem to be important for them.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
brought
it's
up a good point.
interesting. There's bonds, there's guilds, there's
Hmm.
esports teams, and sometimes you're kind of part of a bond, part of this guild, or you're part of this esports team. It doesn't exactly mean that if I'm part of Exile, I'm only with Exile, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It's
Yeah, and I
wholesome.
mean, to your point, Muka, like there's a range of like we're servicing more players versus we're very exclusive, right? And I think that's one way to look at the difference between bonds, right? And probably the range of competitive applications are going to fall along there as well. Like a more exclusive bond is probably by default looking for winners, like tournament winners. Really, they're recruiting elite players versus an organization like Paragons is more like, hey, we're looking for people who could be maybe top 100 ladder placers, right? Versus, hey, you need to be like actually able to win tournaments. So I think that there's a lot of different opportunities that will come out of this. And yeah, I think for people right now sort of following along, staying tuned, if you're listening and you're interested, finding connections to those teams, joining the relevant discords, asking questions. Right now it is a bit more of a seeker's market, so to speak. Like you are going to have to poke around and find some information and DM some people and do things like that. But where what I'm saying is eventually this is going to be much more of like a singular portal, click here, click there,
Mhm.
now you've applied type of experience. But it's probably for the best if you are interested to start that process now, because typically once things are at the easy UX phase, it's harder to get in, right? Because
Absolutely.
more people are there, more people are clicking, more people are applying. And certainly when we're in the lead up to season two, I would imagine that bonds are at that, are very close to that type of place, right? So, once the once season two is rolling out and people see what's going on there, I think that there will certainly be an appetite to want to join bonds. And if it's already easy at that point, maybe I'm not saying you missed the boat, but I'm saying it might be worth kind of initiating the process now, even if it's a little bit more manual. So
I'm just curious on a little bit more of a technical question. So we're acknowledging that like the flavor, the vibes from bond to bond are all going to be different. But on the echelon side of things, just like the structure of how they're lined up, is it always like the same earning potential for the borrower from bond to bond? Is that systematic, or is that up to like the discretion of individual bonds?
yeah, I think for the time being, given that it's like an early rollout phase, that is consistent, right? There is some just consistency. Hey, we want to keep the system in one type of way. But I do believe that there will be some ability to configure those different things down the line as bonds enter successive phases of rollout. So that's very much a TBD thing, and I think what we're gonna see is a lot of people giving feedback on that.
Mm.
And the bonds might say, "Hey, we want to do a different type of split." At the end of the day, that's where the competitive sort of capital market thing comes in, and really what that would end up with is better rates for players. If there's competition, the outcome of competition is better rates for players every single time, right? If you run 100 simulations, 100 of them are going to spit out a better rate for players if you have multiple parties competing, because one will say we're going to offer you a better rate and so on and so forth, right? And then others have to sort of adapt or maybe miss out on players because the rate was different for a certain competitor. Um, so I think it would be cool to see that, and bonds being able to sort of tweak those rates so we can get some sort of capital competition going on there. But for now, it's going to be pretty straightforward. That standard split. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's 60 for the player. So the player's making most of the prime that they would be earning and spending nothing. Right, their sunk cost is
I
quite
think
literally
it's more
zero.
than that.
I think it
Is it more?
I think it's
could be
80-20. 80
80,
player,
Yeah, it
80
might be. It
player,
yeah.
might
20
be
bond.
80. Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe the initial proposal was 60, but yeah, I mean, 80, especially then you're looking at a completely zero risk situation and getting 80% of everything that to be made, and that's pretty unbelievable, right? Like
Yep.
it's very rare to find something like that. Now, of course, there's a time commitment there. And so from both the bond perspective and the player perspective, there's a need to be bought in, and a need to be sort of like, hey, I'm going to be a serious player. But for those who are serious players, it's a pretty incredible arrangement. I mean, it's very, very favorable. So, and the bonds, it's their own scale and their own sort of level of competitiveness that they want to roll out. Because hey, again, if you have less players, that's less players earning. But if they're earning at a higher level and competing in tournaments, versus maybe we want to have 5 times as many players for one organization like Paragons, for example. So there's all different kinds of structures that are viable.
I have a question. Do the bonds, or are there bonds that are lending out keys? Because that's incredibly valuable.
Hmm.
Yeah, there definitely are. I mean, there's,
Yeah.
and I would say that keys are probably some of the most sought after things right now. There have been some conversations with folks who are, interested in coming on as bonds that I've talked to in some capacity where like Parallel is doing a collaboration with this organization, and then they're like, "Hey, what about bonds?" And I'm like, "Yeah, by all means." And they're like, "Okay, we got to find a way to get some keys because it seems like everybody wants the keys." And so
Of
certainly
course.
it's going to be interesting to see like what impact bonds have on legendaries, what impact bonds have on keys, maybe in the future what impact they have on avatars, right? Like it's going to be quite interesting to see how the market reacts to some of those things.
One thing that I don't think we really discussed quite yet is the concept of lending your cards to a bond. Like Gabby, you were
Mhm.
discussing, you actually have quite a bit of cards. I've got some as well. I'm not really a part of a bond. Like if you have, a collection of cards, you also can lend to a bond and, get 10%, I think, of the prime earned if someone is using your card, correct?
Yeah, that's something that I would actually be looking forward to do myself. I do have quite a bit of cards, especially yeah, in Planetfall and probably in Aftermath when it comes out. So we're not competitive, or I personally am not that competitive when it comes to alpha cards, but from there onwards, Planetfall onwards, I do have. So I have been thinking about, I actually have a bunch of unopened packs still, and I'm wondering whether I should just keep them unopened or bust
Yeah.
them open.
Yeah, that's
Don't
always a
stare at them
tough
too
one.
long. You'll always rip them if you stare at them too long.
I know, right?
I
I mean,
I
the
do want
cool
to
the
note
cool
that.
Yeah,
No, go
just
ahead,
real quick.
Fitch.
The cool thing is that you can see the contents of what could be in there on chain. I mean, this is something that, like, compared to other TCGs, is very, very cool in my opinion. Like, you can go in there and poke around and be like, what might I be able to hit here?
Mhm.
And that is just something that you literally cannot do in a traditional physical
Yep.
TCG. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I actually don't think about that too often, but there are times with key cards. Like I think Miasmancer was a big one I saw. Like bonds were like struggling to get, and I saw like that there's still a decent amount left in like packs, and it's kind of like a mad dash. Like, what do we do? How do we get more of the Miasmancers? And seeing that effect is really cool. I did want to note though, to the point of like collectors and stuff lending, that's actually a very big part of the bonds ecosystem that I don't think gets talked about too much, but I know there is like always an active like lookout from the bond side for people that are buying packs or even have any key cards that are willing to lend, that they want to get them onboarded into their bond ecosystem. So if you do have cards, that is like a route that you could take. Like, let's say you're not playing all the time, and or you're not playing all the time, you still enjoy the game, but you have all these cards and some of them are very like sought after. What do I do with them? You can take them to a bond and be part of integrated into their system. And essentially, if anybody borrows from the bond and gets your card, then you are getting part of that cut.
Do all of the
Yeah.
bonds offer that?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I think, I mean, it depends on the structure, right? Because like some bonds are reliant on like a single holder or wallet, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm not going to say Paragons is exclusively one thing, but they themselves are a large entity that holds a lot of cards and keys and stuff. But a group like Exile that I know personally, like, yes, they do look for collectors more so than having a huge war chest themselves, and try to onboard them into their ecosystem. And their kind of thing is like, hey, we have really good competitive players, both in like the league and outside of the league, just good players overall. If you come to us, like, we'll make sure good players are playing with your cards.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna see probably models with both, right?
Yeah,
Some
for
models
sure.
where they don't accept that, and some models where they very much want that, right? So it's again, I think it's cool because it's a fairly modular system, and right, like you've got numbers now and numbers what it might be in the future, and numbers what they might be when competitive, sort of rates open up, and then you've got basically different models that can work, whether they're more open versus more closed, whether they want outside collectors versus whether they don't. I think it's cool. It just gives a lot of flexibility, and to me, it answers really like a lot of the core technical and like practical questions around having a digital owned card economy, right? So, it just opens up a lot of, like, to Mooka's earlier point about the trading card store sponsoring you. This is like really that on steroids.
Mhm.
There's so many different ways to get involved in the ecosystem, and I'm curious, like, have we maybe Gabby, Mooka, like, you having your TCG experience in the past, like, have you seen this before, or is this something really only that is allowed because of Web3 and crypto and that type of a thing?
In online TCGs,
Well, just the whole bond system in general, like, it's a fairly
nothing to this
revolutionary.
level. Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing to this level. It's
yeah,
always a single entity, like a local card shop and paper TCGs
that's
that's
right.
willing to like take the burden, because it's essentially for them more of a marketing thing than anything. Like,
right.
hey, come to my shop, we have good players, that kind of thing. But in online TCGs, especially never, like not to this level. Even in physical, it's not to this level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very hard to scale the trustless lending that can only happen powered by blockchain. It's hard to have like a large physical organization saying, I'm going to lend out 30,000 magic cards and keep track of everything and everyone, especially if you're lending out high value cards, right? And yeah, with NFTs, this is something that you can do. So I think it's actually really, really cool.
Yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
this is. I mean, I think that bonds have the potential to be really the thing that gets people on board or, like, makes them understand why blockchain works for things like trading card games, and, you know, the next question is, as a total newbie to Web3 and crypto and NFTs and everything like that, do you need to be involved in crypto to join a bond or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of remains to be seen. But that goes back to the delineation between a bond and an esports organization in parallel. Like, you definitely don't need to be involved with Web3 to be part of Parallel in general, right? And it's probably the case that most bonds would still be interested in having you in some capacity, if you're just an absolutely cracked player,
Yeah.
because they want, like Mooka's point earlier about, hey, how did I get involved with Exile? He was just saying, hey, look, I'm making decks, I'm capable of deck building, I'm capable of thinking strategically. Bonds are still going to benefit from that type of person being involved. And whether or not the person wants to accept the completely free assets and rewards that come with using Web3, even if they just have some idealistic thing where they're like, I don't want to do that, they could still very much theoretically be part of those organizations, right? And then also just the other esports organizations that are going to be around the parallel ecosystem are also completely viable places. And then there's just the solo route. You could just be a solo player who you want to just do the sort of traditional non Web3 route, which is basically the same as Hearthstone. I might buy packs, I might buy battle pass, I might just go free to play and get the cards that way and then compete. So that's also completely viable. So it's really anything that that individual wants to do. I think it would be really almost silly not to participate in the web3 aspects, because like again, you don't have to spend anything to do it if you're a top player and you're going to make money by playing. And so I wouldn't really understand why you would not want to do it. But theoretically, Ali, to your point, no, you would not have to do it. And I would imagine Bonds would still want those people to be working with them. But I think that those people would see, hey, we should just be doing this anyway, right? Like
My
it's
question
free,
is there going to be a really competitive player or a pro esports player who's going to say, no, I don't want to earn more, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
I mean, and that's the thing. So it's a theoretical possibility that's interesting to consider, but I think that that person, when they got to that level, would be like, why would I not do this? And we've seen that. We've already seen that. It's not like we're trying to shove Web3 down people's throats. We don't particularly care if you play Web3 or not. But if you do, or if you are a top player, I guess I should say, you will see the benefits 100%, right? Because people will be willing to give you the cards. Bonds will want you, and then if you have the cards, you're going to be making free money. So why would you
yeah.
not? Is kind of the point.
Even for free to play players, cards for multiple decks at a competitive level are not insanely fast. Like, you can get one competitive deck obviously for free from when
Mm,
joining Parallel, like the AP versions, and then you can build another deck probably fairly easy. But at the top end, if we're talking about that kind of player, not everybody applies to this for sure. But if you are like trying to be like competitive, you'll probably need like four or five decks, right, to like
yeah,
really have a solid footing at the top end. And I'm specifically talking about that. So bonds offer you a fast track to get those cards, even if you don't care about the crypto experience, you don't care about the earnings. A lot of players are coming in and just want the cards so they can play in the tournaments.
yeah,
And if you go you go the free to play route again, you get one deck for free through the creator program, and then you can make one fairly quickly, a couple weeks in, and then but there's still like two or three that you probably want to cover base with, and the bonds still help you facilitate that at a much faster rate, even if you don't care about the earnings. So I think that's pretty attractive. And I do want to quickly touch on some personal anecdotes outside of bonds that I've seen since I've joined Parallel that have been crazy wholesome experiences to get people into Parallel. I saw it with Tyler and Fino, especially when Tyler came in like guns blazing, and then he took some time to convince Fino. And I remember Tyler just sending cards to Fino like crazy. And Fino was like, "I'm just getting all these cards, like this is crazy." And then the other one that I want to note is Free Tip Scout, who's now like a master player, avid, parallel caster, super knowledgeable guy. When he was first starting out, like he didn't really have too much. It was pretty much free to play. And people were like, hey, people that were watching his Twitch stream, like, send me your wallet, sending him keys, sending him cards. That like we're in a perfect it's such a neat we're in a niche community, but the people want to see each other like enjoy and have fun and be a part of like what's happening here as it's starting. And the community has been extremely generous to like new players that are giving it a shot and being like, hey, here's this. I think Q Flux got like the red harf, like which was like exclusive
Mhm.
only from entering a tournament. and someone
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, you've been like putting out banger content lately. Just take this." And that kind of experience, you cannot get that in any other online TCG right now. And even in physical TCGs, it does not happen to the level that it's happening in parallel. And it's really amazing to see, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, echoing that, that's been my favorite thing as part of the parallel community since the beginning. Like, that is the coolest aspect by far. Everybody's extremely generous. Everybody's like, yo, here, take this card. Here's an avatar. Let's get you going. And I think
Yeah.
from people, the outside looking in, if you're curious about parallel, that would be probably one of the main things I would emphasize is like we actually are really nice. I think despite the occasional bits of drama that happen and however that may seem, it's like really I think people the only reason that people get frustrated is because we actually are nice and they feel like, oh, you're demonizing me, like what have we done wrong? Like we haven't done anything wrong. At the end of the day, we're just trying a different model of how to do digital TCGs, and I don't see that anybody's being harmed by it, right? But I think that what it comes down to is a lack of awareness of what's really going on, and so you hear about these things, and if you're a layperson, you're like, well, everybody sort of uses that pyramid scheme word, right? And
Yeah.
not understanding that that's categorically different than what's happening here. There's no situation, there's no pyramid scheme ever in history where you take zero financial risk and you get reward. That's
So
literally
true.
the opposite of what that is, okay? So, let me just say that unequivocally, like, that is categorically the opposite of what a pyramid scheme is. So, in this system, you are quite literally able to, participate in a social network, and get value for free, literally for free. So, take advantage of that if you are listening to this and you're intrigued by what you hear and you're just like, hey, I'm a good TCG player, or hey, I'm a good strategy game player. Give it a shot. There's a lot of fun stuff going on here. We're going to be kicking it up a notch. We've got a lot of exciting plans for what we're going to be doing with the league and what's going on with Parallel as a whole. And it's cliche, but it's still early. So
When it's such a new concept, you really need to prove the model, right? Give people the example, and that's what Parallel has the opportunity to do here. And I've taken a little bit more of a compassionate approach where a lot of the people who don't think this is a bad system or whatever, like they're coming from a good place. Like they don't want people to get
oh
scammed,
yeah.
right? And so it's like when you put it into that perspective, okay, let's just prove the model, right? That Parallel is making this flourishing ecosystem. Eventually, if we just keep doing what we're doing, they will see in time that we just genuinely think this is a better system for, structuring TCGs. And so, I really believe that that's what's happening here. I
100%.
want to give the last like few minutes of the episode here to Gabby's to just sort of like talk about YGG a little bit more. Like if someone wanted to join, the esports team, how would they go about that? And also just kind of talk a little bit about the summit that's coming up in a couple weeks and let us know like what's happening there.
Let's start with the summit, and thank you, Ali. So the YGG Play Summit is happening November 19th to 23rd in Manila. So it's just a couple of weeks from now. This is the third year that we're doing it, and the crazy thing is that each year the games just get better. We had Parallel actually last year. Yeah, and yeah, now a lot has changed. There's a lot more players. There's a lot of different games that are ready. So it's just really exciting. We have 3 full days of esports tournaments. We have over 200 creators, Web 2 and Web 3 coming. We have
Wow.
the first physical version of the Game Awards, which is really cool. So we kind of get to dress up and we get to have game developers accepting awards. So get ready, Kalos, and you should dress up. Yeah, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. There's gonna be a ton of booths, ton of people, and I think this is gonna be the biggest gathering of high-level TCG players IRL that you're gonna see this year. Because the Parallel League finals is next year, so this year we can take the crown.
Yeah, that's true. You will.
Yeah, we'll link the Parallel is nominated for like Game of the Year, Best TCG, Esports Scene. Like Parallel's got a lot of nominations. So in the show notes or the YouTube video link, we'll put the link to vote for the Game Awards in the description. So you
Halo
can,
should be bringing some hardware home.
yeah.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, Yeah, if I don't know if we'll get back to back on Game of the Year just because Off the Grid was so hype and everybody is just like gets all hyped up about things, and obviously it's a great product. So I don't mean to say anything about the product. It's really high quality, and yeah, there's some things that may potentially be interesting with Off the Grid as well. I'm just gonna drop that and not say anything else about that. But yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. But I mean, I hope we can get best TCG, right? Like we got to be getting that one. So.
Come on, right?
Yeah.
See. And then real quick, anything other related to YGG, like parallel players that want to be a part of YGG, like what does that look like? Yeah,
Yeah, we have quests that run season after season. So this is going to be the third straight season starting next week that we're going to feature parallel quests. So go to yieldguild.io on the website or discord.gg/YDG on the Discord. And yeah, you'll find a ton of players there who are ready to help, especially for those on the Asian side. If you're from Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, there's a ton of people that are looking to help you out. And yeah, it's a really fun community.
amazing. Well, guys, are there any final thoughts that you want to bring up on the episode to talk to the people, bonds, esports, anything?
Well, I guess I'll first say you guys are awesome, and I've been loving the league show, right? Like this has been really cool, and for listeners, I'm somewhere behind the scenes, but these two are running the ship along with our friends at 983, and that's been great. And we are going to have more exciting guests, so please stay tuned to this show going forward. Make sure you're subbing on YouTube. Make sure you're following the Parallel League Twitter, so you can sort of stay up to date on everything with the league. And then, yeah, I guess where I'll end it off, Ali, is like the league is going to have more coming, right? Like, the way that I would describe season one was a test. We wanted to test this out. We wanted to see if it worked, if, what was going on, if we tried to run an esports league. And I think that we've learned a lot, and we're going to try and roll those lessons over into season two, and then just have a bigger, better esports scene in season two. So like, this is not the end. This is the beginning in every way. So
Amazing. All right. Well, I think that'll probably conclude the sixth episode of the Parallel League podcast. We've got some really exciting guests next week as well, so make sure to tune in for that, Kalos and Koji. So thanks so much, everyone, for listening to the episode, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
cheers, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
This was a 983 Media Productions podcast.